your customers are pretty much familiar with you guys. They are buying from you. You're not able to add in new subscribers. You're not able to let go of your existing subscribers. It's a pretty much plateau phase for you to be in. It's a stalemate. A simple example is your newspapers. If you take India as an example, Hindu is slightly dominant in the southern part of the country, whereas it's in the Indian Express or the Times of India that is in the northern and the western parts. You don't find too much conflicts where the other paper is attempting aggressively to come into this paper's domain. So they've essentially established their zone, saying that I'm comfortable with this market. This is where I'm standing at. So it's essentially a stalemate. Now, how we can explain this concept from Ramayana? That is where you need to know the subplot of Sugriva and his brother Vali.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another episode on the Book Talkies podcast, where Anirudh and we have a mission where we want our viewers and potential readers to fall in love with books. And today, to accomplish our mission, we are joined by a unique professor and student duo who have co-authored a book. So on that note, Let me welcome Dr. Prateek, who is associated with IIFT, one of the prominent MBA schools in India. He's joined by his student Sagar, who works in an MNC bank. Today, it's about the book that you see that Sagar is holding that they have authored. It's called the Marketing Gita. Can I start with the obvious thing? 2 words in your title, Marketing Gita. It just somehow gives me that Devdutt Patnaik feeling. Were you planning for that? I remember he had this Business Sutra book and his channel. The smooth concept, mythology concept marrying with the latest business approach. He did that beautifully, and I think he created this unique genre. Were you intending to do something like that while you were writing the book?
So Kaustubh, at the end of the day, when you're writing a marketing book, you need to be very sure of what you are writing it to. Because since you guys are readers, you know that there's a conundrum that an author always has. What they want to write versus what the reader wants to read. So we had to find the middle ground in between them. So when you attempt to come to that middle ground, unfortunately, you will have to follow what the market leader has already said. So in this case, that market leader is Devdutt Patnaik. So whether consciously or subconsciously, you might go into that. But at the end of the day, what happens is in terms of art form, be it your song, movies, books, or writing for that matter, every generation, every time period seeks that freshness. So maybe you can say that we got inspired from Devdutt Patnaik, but it was not intentional. So to coming back to your question, what exactly the Marketing Gita is about. So right now, and when we just take a competitive landscape, there are various books in terms of what business needs to be done, what an entrepreneur needs to do, etc., etc. But there's nothing that will help them understand in a very layman perspective. As they say, if you are able to teach it like you're teaching it to a 5-year-old, then that means you have truly mastered the subject. Our attempt of how we can distill that information in the easiest way that people know, that's stories. And what better story resort that I can have except for our Hindu mythology itself. So that's how the idea for the book has started. So within Hindu mythology, we have picked up Lord Vishnu's Dashavatar, because one of the avatars, Lord Krishna, has given Bhagavad Gita. So that is where the germ of this book has started. So from there we have started. Then you can ask, why particularly marketing? Why not business as a whole? So you see, people have a misconception that business is different from marketing. They treat marketing as a very separate function that comes at the end. But we respectfully disagree. We believe
you tell that to Anirudh. I belong to the marketing and sales field. You tell that to Anirudh. I believe you.
I'm waiting to be convinced here, but I'll listen to you guys.
So it's if you think about it, it's a classic case of chicken and egg problem. People think that I have a business idea first, I'll establish it, then after I have everything done, then I'll go and take it to the customer. But you need to keep your customer in mind when you start your idea itself. Like when you identify a problem, that is where your customer insights comes into place. And what is customer insight? That's nothing but your marketing function where you are actually, searching what your customer wants. So that is where your marketing as a function starts. So this is where people have that misconception. That's the reason, let's stick to marketing. Let's try to see if we can attempt to solve for this misconception in our own way, a small bit, because we are practitioners of marketeers and we want to do our bit to the subject. So that's where, mythology and marketing, the amalgamation has come into the Marketing Gita.
Quite interesting. So maybe question from me is the book focused on an audience who already has some inclination towards marketing, and how the mythology sort of links back to the core marketing principles? Or are you also sort of focusing on people who do not really understand the value of marketing, the importance of marketing, and then sort of layer in from mythology's point of view? Here are some examples, which really real life examples of companies, of how things have happened, how business models have evolved, how companies have evolved, how products have evolved, and then sort of emphasize on the fact that marketing is a very important aspect of any business.
Okay, so I'll answer this question in two aspects, Anirudh. What is the fundamental duty of any business out there? It is to earn money. No matter I start in year 1 or I start in year 10, my business is at age 25. No matter what time the business is in, its single most its single most objective is to just earn money. But there's a difference on how I earn money at what stage. You cannot expect me to run when I'm just a baby, or you cannot just expect me to work like when I'm an old man. So the challenges or the problems that you face at each stage are different. So what people, or what the general idea is, they tend to miss out this nuance. They simply say that, oh, brand A has done this, they have signed down a Bollywood A-lister, so let me also sign out as an influencer for a startup. But a startup who's not having so much fund and resources, it's not a very prudent step, to sign out an A-lister without getting its fundamentals in place. So what worked out for brand A does not always work out for brand B. There are numerous examples out there. History is always a reminder that brands that flew very high in the sun had to fall at some or the other point in time. So how can we synthesize this complex conundrum in a very simple way? So that's where we realized we go back to the fundamentals of Hindu mythology, and that's where we found our answer. So if you go back to Hinduism or Hindu mythology, as people call it, it relies on one basic principle. Time is always cyclical. It's not linear. What goes around has to come around, and it goes on and on with balance out there. And it has three principal deities: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma is the creator of the known universe, Vishnu is the preserver of it, and Shiva is the destroyer. Now, the single line KRA of Vishnu is simple. You need to preserve the universe as and when and restore the balance. To do that, he has taken many avatars of them, and the prominent of them are 10 avatars. But in each avatar, he had to face a very different challenge. And his answer to that challenge was also different. His objective was simple: save the universe. But how he went about it, why he did that, all those nuances are different. So the person who understands these nuances will probably move better forward. So that's where we wanted to, relate the business, the conundrum that we have explained, something that a brand A need not necessarily do at brand B, and versus what Vishnu is doing across all his 10 avatars. So when we merge these two together, that's where we got our narrative, Marketing Gita. So if you ask me, Anirudh, who is this targeted to? Yes, it is to existing professionals also, because at the end of the day, if they can understand the nuance better, then that means we have done a better job in writing this out. And for somebody who wants to learn about business and marketing, this is a very good start. And you might not be a business person, but if you just want to enjoy a few good mythological stories, this book still has it. So it addresses to all the three target groups.
I have a very fascinating question to ask both of you. Dashavatar, and the assumption is that's how probably you have layered your book. 10 chapters, assuming 10 topics, and you're bringing the every quality of the of Vishnu avatar into that section of the chapter.
Correct.
According to you, first question, which is the coolest Vishnu avatar? When I say coolest, not from the mythology we know, but in your book context. Second, which is the most toughest avatar, and correlating back to which business phase where we need to solve this to?
So for us, probably the coolest, not necessarily easiest, but the coolest to write on was the Rama Avatar, the chapter on Rama. Reason being, people already have put him on a pedestal. He's the ideal person out there. He has all the qualities that a human needs to strive for, and that is not necessarily what a brand aspires to be. So it was slightly easier to not to walk what people expect. But we just said, let's take a step back. Let's not take the easy route out. Let's see what because the story of Ramayana is pretty much out there. There's nothing new that we can reinvent. So what we essentially did is we went back and saw if there are certain nuances that we could pick up. So an example, I'll just put out a case study out there. So let's say you're an established brand. After a certain point, let's say you reach 20% market share. Your competitor is at a 15%. You both are in 10 years into the business. There's nothing much innovation that you can do. Your customers are pretty much familiar with you guys. They are buying from you. You're not able to add in new subscribers. You're not able to let go of your existing subscribers. It's a pretty much plateau phase for you to be in. It's a stalemate. A simple example is your newspapers. If you take India as an example, Hindu is slightly dominant in the southern part of the country, whereas it's in the Indian Express or the Times of India, that is in the northern and the western parts. You don't find too much conflicts where the other paper is attempting aggressively to come into this paper's domain. So they have essentially established their zone, saying that I'm comfortable with this market. This is where I'm standing at. So it's essentially a stalemate. Now, how we can explain this concept from Ramayana? That is where you need to know the subplot of Sugriva and his brother Vali. If I have to take back, they both are Vanara princes. Vali was the king, Sugriva was his brother. So once what happened is Vali went in a hunt of a Rakshasa. He and his brother are on his tail. They finally go all through the forest and they suddenly reach a cave. So in that cave, Vali notices that the demon is hiding in there. So he instructs his brother saying that, you wait here. I'll go inside, I'll kill him out. If I don't come within 7 days, you go and rule the kingdom in my name so that the kingdom should not suffer. Sugriva was a dutiful brother. He waited. Vali went inside. For 7 days, there was lots of shouting, shrieks, whatnot. The fighting happened. And finally, on the 7th day, Sugriva noticed a stream of blood coming in. And he didn't see his brother coming out. So, waiting for his, following his instruction, he simply closed the mouth of the cave, went inside, grieved for his brother, and upon nudged by the elders, he said that, okay, I'll take up the responsibility of the kingdom, and he started up. After 6 months or some period or so, Vali returned back to the kingdom with a vengeance. He misunderstood that his brother Sugriva betrayed him. So that then he said, okay, you know what, you are not... why did you not search for me? Is this what your brother's love is for me? So essentially, the brothers turned into enemies, and Sugriva had to flee for his life. Now, Vali had a typical power. Anybody who stands ahead of him, he can drain the other person's energy. That's the reason you cannot win Vali in a straightforward fight. So what Sugriva does is, Sugriva reaches out to a place called Rishyamukha Hills, where Vali has a curse. The moment he steps onto that land, he's gonna die. So Vali knows where Sugriva is, but he cannot take his revenge because he cannot enter into that. And Sugriva knows where Vali is, but he cannot go into his kingdom. Both are two powerful brothers. They have all the resources out there, but unfortunately they cannot kill each other. So this is what happens when you have two mature brands. You reach a stage, you are comfortable with your market share. There's not much incremental growth that you can expect. All you can do is sustain that out. So this is what it made for us in a coolest sense to write the Rama chapter.
The reason I'm smiling is you're just making me remember my childhood Sundays, man. I'm like, oh yeah, this character was Vali. Oh yeah, this character was Sugriv. Oh yeah, this happened. Oh yeah. I mean, like, thank you for making me remember my childhood. Yeah.
That means our half job is done. That is what this whole book is about, to make you enjoyable on reading of subjects. Moving on to your next question, what was the toughest chapter to write? I would say 2 chapters were tough to write. One was Varaha Avatar. Varaha essentially means a boar, a man with a boar head. He's the 3rd avatar that Lord Vishnu had taken. The other chapter that was tough for us to write was Kalki Avatar, because both of these don't have too much literature out there. Or, out of all the 10 avatars, Rama, Krishna are the popular ones. Everybody knows them. There's almost literature about them. But with the others, there's not too much material to work with. So what me and Dr. Prateek had to do is we had to go back to the old Hindi and Telugu textbooks. He did his own homework. I went back to I just hit my grandmom's house and my uncle's house. They have a literal nice library of Bhagavata, all the scriptures. So the original source for all these stories was something called as Bhagavatam. It is said by Suta Maharshi as a narration to Parikshit Maharaj. You are familiar with how Pandavas won the war, Kauravas were vanquished, Mahabharata has happened. People think that that is the end of the story. It's a happy ending for the Pandavas, but unfortunately it was not. All the heirs, all the immediate sons of Pandavas died. There was no heir for them to follow them to their throne. So essentially, the battle that they fought was all pointless. Then essentially, Krishna saved, I think, Uttara's son. Their great grandson is Parikshit. So eventually, he ascends the throne. So once he was hunting and he's searching, he's lost in the forest. He lost. So usually, how royal hunting happens, not a solo effort. You have a whole train of servants carrying, etc., etc. In this excitement, he went inside into the forest and he lost his servant train. He wanted to know where he can quench his thirst. He found a rishi he saw the backside of the rishi who was deep in meditation. He didn't know that he was in meditation. He started calling out to that rishi. He thought that the rishi was deliberately ignoring them, whereas in reality he was not hearing Parikshit's call. So what he does is he takes a dead snake and puts it as a garland on the rishi, and he goes away from there. The rishi's son comes and says, "Okay, who did this with my father? Are you so idiot enough to do such a drastic thing to us revered rishi?" And he curses that whoever did this will die within 7 days. And he got to know that was Parikshit king, and when he says it to his father chides him. You are a rishi, you are supposed to be above all your emotion, you're not supposed to dish out curses in such a format. Why don't you go back to Parikshit and tell that he's gonna die in 7 days? Because once you give a curse, you cannot take it back. There are certain fundamental rules on how these things work. So Parikshit knew that he's gonna die in 7 days, and that too by the snake bite. So what he wanted to do is he wanted to utilize the best of the 7 days that he has. So in the meantime, Suta Maharshi is essentially a rishi among rishis. Suta Maharshi, the learned sage, was traveling in that kingdom nearby. So he said, "Sir, why don't you come? I'll come to your ashram. You give me all the dharma discourses that I need to learn over in an age of 70 years. I need to learn it within 7 days." So in that discourse, he tells all the stories of Lord Vishnu in a title called as Bhagavatam. So that is the original source where these stories come from. So that is the first book that we hit. And then certain nuances by learned poets on how they interpret this, because even within so Sanskrit is a very beautiful language. In essentially, you can write a 33,000 word book based on 20 sentences itself. That's how succinct the language is. We hit few resources of that, their interpretations of that story, because essentially we wanted to understand how we can interpret, and we don't want to be on the wrong side, because when you're writing a book as an author, it's your responsibility that you're putting the best material out there, the factual material out there. And we didn't in an area like mythology, we didn't want to take any chances. So that's a reason we hit the original source Bhagavata and few other discourses.
So the base was there, and then Ramayana individual incarnation, and then going back to the individual stories, like story of Rama and Ramayana, then basically the Mahabharata, right? Then something we read few things about Buddha also. See, quickly adding to what Sagar has said is Vara avatar and Kalki avatar. Kalki is obviously because we all are now living it, right?
Yes, not yet happened.
Not had happened, and basically we are into Kali Yuga. Not much is aware of it. What will happen, right? So that is one very obvious reason. Second reason is Vara, why Sagar said so is very correct, because that was a transition which was happening from animal to human beings. That is what we have mentioned in the book also, right? Believe me, any transition is always a painful and a challenging thing, right? So during writing this book also, writing the transition and connecting that with the business aspect was also equally challenging, but yes, beautifully explained that how a brand moves from introduction to growth to moving to the maturity. That is how we tried to make it understand, right? If I remember correctly, Sagar, this was the time when we were discussing about Chasm also, right? That was again, that is even in books also, that is something people, that is the gap, when you move from introduction to growth, right? So if you actually jump to that then only you are successful, otherwise you will be out of market soon. That is how the book also says, right? Achha, quickly adding to what Anirudh has said, and then we can come to the next part. See, the focus of the book was never students, honestly, right? Because they are already you reading some X or Y or Z book, and if you would have written something like that, talking about 4 P's of market, then it would not have solved the purpose of any of the, because ultimately reading that what is already in the market, people will not go for us, right? They will go to that X book or Y book, right? But how beautifully these principles, frameworks can be incorporated while reading a story, because all of you will agree, we all remember the lessons which we have learned in the form of stories, right? So even today also, many of the good things which are there in our life, that humko sach bolna chahiye, we should tell the truth, right? We should not cheat anybody. They all are either from Ramayana, Mahabharata, or maybe from, say for example, Jatak tales, or maybe from Panchatantra. You remember that. Ultimately, Panchatantra and Jatak were also created for the same reason, teaching those people, that is the Raja ke jo, the 4 princes, right? Teaching them,
Vishnu Sharma.
but because they were Mandabuddhi, that is what the Panchatantra talks about, Vishnu Tattva, right? So ultimately teaching them, ultimately the idea was, if I teach them Gyan, definitely they will not learn it. But if I teach them stories or make them listen stories, along with that I teach them some Gyan, that will be okay. If you directly learn marketing, probably you may be interested, may not be interested, because I have to change the examples only, but I cannot change the story. I cannot change the principles, 4 P's, right? But if I change the narrative itself, starting from stories, how things change, and parallelly I am feeding you with some principles, some theories, some frameworks, that will be probably more easy for readers to retain, as compared to if I am directly giving them the theory and then giving them example, right? So ultimately, not students, but anybody, as rightly Sagar has said, that anybody who is interested in reading, anybody who is interested in mythology, anybody who is interested in starting his business, anybody who is an avid reader, even you and I, or any doctor or any astronaut who feels that why can't I market myself, that can also be, this book can also be for them also. So anybody who is interested in making their own image better, that is how I will put it, right?
So I just want to elaborate on the transition what Dr. Prateek had hit on. So if I just give an example of all the 10 avatars, the first avatar is called as Matsya avatar, which is essentially a fish. Second is Kurma avatar, a tortoise. Third is Varaha avatar, a boar. So the first 3 avatars are essentially animals, starting from a water base slowly to land base. The 4th avatar, that is where you have a break, is Narasimha avatar, half lion, half man. The 5th avatar is essentially a small boy dwarf. 6th avatar is a grown man carrying an axe, which is called Parashuram avatar. 7th avatar is obviously the Rama, the ideal man. 8th avatar is Krishna. 9th avatar is Buddha. And 10th is Kalki. So if you put a progression to all this, you see where humanity had started and where humanity is going to end. And the beauty is, this is all going to happen in cycles. We may or may not be able to witness it, but it's not a start and an end. It's a complete circle that just keeps going on and on. So if you take a business like a baby, you just start off somewhere not with enough resources, and suddenly you grow to a mammoth where you start losing your market share. We wanted to capture on using Vishnu stories.
Absolutely beautiful. I mean, I can already see, going back to the first point which Costa had when he was introducing you guys, the professor-student duo. I think you guys complement each other really well. What a journey this must have been. Mythology and history in general is a subject which me and Costa absolutely love, hands down. And the stories of Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, they are up there, right up there in terms of what I absolutely love. And if you can layer in marketing to that, you have sold the book to me at least. Thank you very much for being on the show. And we really wish you the very best for your book and for the reprint.